Morning folks, another video here. I'm cheating a little bit in that I'm not in the natural habitat for this particular tree, but the fact is it's just been planted so widely that it probably doesn't matter. This is Eucalyptus microcorys, the Tallowwood. And as far as, I guess, East Coast eucalypts go, it's just been so widely planted. It's been a real go-to for landscapers and local councils, I guess, and just cityscapes generally. In Sydney, the best place to see it is to just go to a sports field and just look at the trees they've used around the sports field in the car park. It's a real sports ground favourite. I've seen it on golf course fairways, parks, kids' playgrounds, you know, soccer fields, cricket fields, footy fields. It's been used absolutely everywhere. The natural distribution is from around Morisset in New South Wales. And then it goes up to, so that's in the Lake Macquarie area north of Gosford. And then it goes up into Queensland, along the coast and the coastal hinterland. It doesn't get too far inland. And it goes up there to Fraser Island and Hervey Bay. That's sort of the northern distribution. But as we can imagine, that distribution is probably getting a bit muddied now because it's just been planted absolutely everywhere. I'm in Milperra here in southern Sydney. So if you're going to get in bushland up along the Pacific Highway, you know, driving up to Port Macquarie and Coffs Harbour and maybe Taree, those areas, you can easily see this guy in the bushland. You can find it growing with trees like Corymbia maculata, maybe something like Corymbia intermedia and Eucalyptus carnea. But really, it's just one of those trees that it's easy enough to learn in an urban landscape. It's just been planted so readily. In the Bankstown area here, we do get it going weedy in the bushlands. We've got a bit of Cumberland Plain woodland and river flat forests, really nice patches, and there are some instances where microcorys is just sort of forming smaller sapling trees in the natural bushlands. So it is becoming a little bit weedy outside its natural range, but they could probably be controlled easy enough. A bit like lemon-scented gum, Corymbia citriodora, that does that around here too in some little pockets I'm aware of. This is what you typically get with microcorys. They can be a tree to 60 metres tall in their natural habitat. That's probably up there in the north coast, North Tablelands, I'd imagine. I don't quite see them that big when they're planted. These ones are probably hitting, these ones might be pushing something like 25 metres. I grew up with one on the sort of corner of a cul-de-sac on a property I lived in as a teenager, just over there in Chippy Norton, a nice big one there. The thing with microcorys is they've got a beautiful overarching form. They can create this really nice, what I call sort of mushroom shape, or just like a broad dome. And I think that's why they've just been so popular in cultivation, and maybe some people can put in the comments what else they know about their sort of popularity. I'd say probably through the latter half of the 20th century as a popular tree. This one here, it's just got such a beautiful sort of broad dome habit. I know they're sort of merging into each other, but they're just a really reliable planting. To me, it seems when we get really bad storms and wind events, they might lose a lot of material, but they don't tend to fall down. They really don't tend to fall over, microcorys. They can have just these really extensive root systems. They seem to be a really strong tree. I've got roots here about almost 10 metres from the base of that tree there. They've just got a really strong extensive root system. So they don't fall over very often. You can pick them from a distance eventually. Like if I go across the sports field here, there's one, right there. It's got a nice broad shape out in the sunlight. They've just got a beautiful shape to them, and you can eventually get your Eucalyptus eye in, and you can pick them from a distance. You can pick them on the side of the road when you're driving along in your car. They've just got a bit of a unique look to them, which you can pick eventually. In terms of, like I do, linking things to everything else, the tree it looks like the most from a distance is probably something like Eucalyptus resinifera from Sydney. You're probably going to think it might be resinifera. And if you're further north, you're going to think it's probably Acmenoides. That would be really tricky, I think, when you've got microcorys growing with Acmenoides further north in New South Wales. I made a video on Acmenoides in Newcastle area, and I think I had microcorys in the bush there as well. Acmenoides has very different fruit. If you can get hold of the fruit, and I think the buds as well, but for me the go-to would be the fruit. The fruits are very different between the two, and there might be a few differences in leaf length and leaf texture as well, but or leaf appearance, but the leaves of the two are very similar, and the trunks of the two are very similar as well. So you're looking at a sort of resinifera, Acmenoides sort of looking tree. Just going to go through the bark over here. I've got a whole heap of beautiful material. What I like about microcorys is it's usually easy to collect a lot of fertile material. I just had a tree where I want to show some really cool features that it's got. So look, it looks like a mahogany / stringy bark. It's got a sort of mahogany-like trunk. I wouldn't call it a genuine stringy bark. This stuff is very spongy. It's got a very sort of spongy feel to it. So it's a bit more along allied to resinifera and robusta in terms of the bark. Sort of breaking up, and if I had a stringy bark like Laboidia, it wouldn't sort of break up like that. It's a very spongy feeling bark, but it does look like a stringy, and it does look like a mahogany. But as you can see, I'm not really pulling off really long strips. I'm just pulling off these sort of moist, these moisture strips. One of the things that microcorys can have is these really cool little flakes on the bark, and they're described as mica, like mica flakes, sort of that silica material. I don't see them all the time, and I have read a description about them, and I've heard people talk about them as well. But as you come up here, I can just get my fingernail and sort of, yeah, you can sort of scratch these little plates off. You just don't see them all the time, but these older trees here, they've got some really cool flakes on them there that you can sort of scratch off there a little bit. Yeah, these ones are sort of drying and shedding off. See that on top of the stringy fibers? That's really cool. Yeah, just an additional feature it's got. I just don't see it all the time. Like for example, you'll get patches like this where there aren't any. But sometimes if you have a look, you'll definitely see these broken up flakes. Really cool. Now, it's July, and I've just noticed that the ones in Sydney have been flowering for a fair bit of time. They've been flowering for the last month. As far as I can see online, the flowering times are spring and maybe summer. But this guy in Sydney is putting on a good show right through the autumn and into the midwinter. So this is what I got today. Normally you can just grab this off some low-hanging branches, and it's not too hard to get some fertile material. Probably start with the leaves. One of the things about microcorys, I don't know whether to get in the sun or the shade here, I'll just stick to the shade for now, but one of the things about microcorys I sort of find is the leaves aren't overly long. They don't have an overly long leaf, and I think they're described as being up to about 15 or 18 centimetres. Now that is long, but when you just see them in Sydney, they tend to have a leaf that's about 10 centimetres long or thereabouts. See, these guys are very short, and that's one of the things that helps me pick them from a distance, is just the shorter leaf. So resinifera will tend to have a longer leaf most of the time. Some of these leaves are, yeah, they're probably just a bit over 10 centimetres. But you just get a lot of short leaves. So I think they can be up to about 3.5 centimetres wide. They don't have the uneven base that the stringy barks have. Remember that feature? They won't generally have the uneven base. Not that I've seen it very pronounced and regular anyway. I have never closely had a look at all the typical features of microcorys because it's just so easy to identify most of the time. You might get some leaves with a bit of an uneven base. It just doesn't seem to be doing it regularly and strongly like it does in a lot of the stringy barks. So again, it's allied to more of the mahoganies. The leaves, I think overall, they're on the thin side. They've got a little bit of papery thinness to them. So I'm not saying they're overly thin, but you would say they're on the thin sort of end of the spectrum. Just trying to get my act together here. Yeah, they're not overly thick. If you shape the branch, it's a little bit papery. It's got that sort of rustly sort of feel to it. And you probably picked up already, the leaves are strongly discolorous. They've got that real mahogany feature, or that sort of allied to the mahoganies. It's really strongly discolorous. So a very dark green up the top and a very pale green down below. So that's just one feature of them. That's pretty consistent. You're not getting anywhere near concolorous leaves. So we would say strongly discolorous for this one. The juvenile leaves, I've never had a really close look at. I don't think the juvenile leaves are markedly different to the adults. It's one of those ones where they're not markedly different. And I would assume the juvenile leaves would be discolorous as well. We've got our buds, and we get to the meaning of that botanical name, microcorys. And it's all to do with this really typical bud structure and the really tiny bud cap. There we go. That's really typical consistent buds for microcorys, and they're described as being a clavate shape, like a club. They're fatter at the end and they're skinnier down the bottom. And the bud cap is just that top bulging bit there. It's just that bulging bit at the top. Now, the umbellasters, they're sort of arranged in these compound groups, these compound inflorescences. You can see how I've got like a branching structure here of umbellasters. It's a bit like what I showed for Eucalyptus bayeriana, this sort of, and Mollicana as well, the grey box. You got a bit of an overall sort of compound panicle or that sort of structure for the flowers. But we've definitely got some here with 7. So you could have a good look at that and research that as you go through. 7 to 9 flowers. The thing about the buds, and I don't think I'll be able to demonstrate this, but I could certainly have a go. The buds have got these cross-like sutures on the top of the operculum. I might be able to just get it there. They've got these cross-like sutures. So there's 4 little segments on the operculum, the only operculum that's on there. So it's almost like it's got 4 petals almost. The operculum is broken into 4 petals. Just got these sutures on them. I just want to see if I can pick it up anywhere else. One of the descriptions for this species is you'll just get a cross going across the top of the bud cap. Now, the other thing they say about microcorys is when the flowers form or the flower buds form, there's 4 sepals that are shed early. So you've got a second bud cap, which is divided into 4 sepals, and they dehisce really early. And then you're left with a genuine bud cap, which we assume would be made out of the petals. And they're divided into 4 as well, or slightly divided into 4 with the cross at the top. So you just got to have a look for that. I think we can just see it in that bud there in the sort of middle of the screen. I can't keep my hands still, unfortunately. But 4 sepals are shed early. Now that's really interesting for a eucalyptus. And because it has those features, the 4 sepals and the cross in the bud cap, it's in its own subgroup. This eucalypt is in its own subgroup. I think it's called alveolata. It's just got a unique combination of features that puts it in its own little unique subgroup. So it's not in with the mahoganies and it's not in with the stringy barks. So obviously it's just in its own little group. Now you can see that with those compound panicles, and there's the beautiful flowers. Each individual flower, if you go from the end of the stamens to the end of the stamens, it'd be about 1 centimetre across. The flowers aren't overly big. So you've got flowers about 10 mil across or something like that. And just with all these sort of compound panicles or maybe just compound inflorescences, you can see that they're almost terminal. It's microcorys does a bit of an Angophora or Corymbia feature where it sort of puts the flowers pretty close to the terminals, or what we would call subterminal. It doesn't really put them down further in the branches. I might have some longer branches here. We can just have a look. You can see that I've got the fruit here now, but you can see that the fruit are going down sort of the branch here. But when they're in flower, the flowers tend to be at the terminals of the plant. It's a little bit Angophora, a little bit Corymbia in that manner, that it just puts the flowers towards the terminals. It's another thing that makes them very easily identifiable when you're driving past in your car and you can see them in flower, just because of these terminal inflorescences, or what we call subterminal. But then the fruits, they sort of get down into the lower branches, probably from last season. And this is a typical microcorys fruit. It's just got this sort of conical shape. They're not overly big. They can be about 7 mil across and about 9 mil long. You can see the peduncle is pretty pronounced. And if we go back to the buds, you can see the peduncles there are pretty pronounced as well. I think the peduncles can be up to 20 mil or something like that. They're not overly long, but you can see they're nice and pronounced there. Maybe 10 to 20 mil, something like that. 20 mil, maybe a little bit longer. And you can see on the fruits that they're nice and pronounced as well. I would say in Acminoides, they're more pronounced, and the Acminoides has a different shaped fruit to this. But you can see the nice conical fruits there. They're not overly large. Like if I look at these ones with the naked eye, they're probably about 5 mil across and maybe about 7 or 8 mil long. They've got 3 to 4 valves, and I think the valves can be rim level or exserted. That one's got 4 and that one's got 3. 3 again and 3 again there. So that's the typical fruit shape for microcorys. Just tend to flower and fruit really reliably and really readily. That might have been another attraction of planting them in a lot of places. But it's just a tree that it's pretty easy to grab material from. So I can't think of too many sort of mahogany looking eucalypts or maybe stringy bark looking eucalypts that have fruit that look like this. So microcorys, it's just a nice easy one. It's a nice easy one to start with. It's a tree you might learn in a landscaping course or definitely in a boriculture course. But they just seem to be really robust trees. They don't seem to get a lot of dieback. They don't seem to fall over. They've just got a lot going for them, and I like them overall. I like them. They're all over Sydney now where they don't belong, but they're I still think they're a beautiful tree that has been chosen for urban landscapes. We've got some remnant trees in this park. We've got a blue box over there, Eucalyptus boweriana, but it's got to share the territory with these microcorys. These days we probably wouldn't plant them so much. We tried to plant our local natives, but these are a beautiful, you know, if a eucalypt's going to be planted in where it doesn't belong, this is probably one of the best choices. I'm not sure how weedy they are around the world. It's possibly that they are. These leaves are very green. Sorry, but some people have told me there are populations where the leaves go a bit bluey. They go a lot more blue in colour. So there's a bit of variation across the natural distribution. I'm just getting out into the sun now, which probably won't help that much, but these are very green microcorys. They're a nice mid-green. I can't see really any hints of blue in there. On the undersides, you might argue there's a little bit of blue, just a tiny bit of bluey green on the underside, but it's more of a pale green. It might have a little dash of blue in it. But some people say up around Port Macquarie and further north, you can get some really blue-leaved specimens and populations. So that's something I'll have to watch out for. Just took the trouble of walking over to this one just to finish off. Here's one all by itself. And they do have a real Acmenoides appearance. I'm just remembering those ones I did in Newcastle. I don't see Acmenoides very often, and I'm not going to see one here. In southwestern Sydney, I just know there wouldn't be any around unless they've been planted. But here's a beautiful big microcorys. They just make for really beautiful trees in the landscape in the sun. And again, they can just put on this beautiful broad almost sort of mushroom dome. They're just a really nice looking tree. Nice to sit under for a picnic. Very noisy on a busy road here, but that's a whole avenue of Eucalyptus microcorys on a road in Sydney. You know, sometimes there's these whole beautiful avenues planted of them along these road strips. Pretty much every one of these trees at Milperra on Henry Lawson Drive is a microcorys. And you can just see what good, reliable eucalypts they make in a landscape sort of environment. It's just a beautiful avenue there. They're all, you know, uniform, nice and reliable.